Chapter Spooks.
G'day, and welcome to Chapter Spooks, where we talk about the books that keep your kids up at night. I'm your host, Matthew A.J. Anderson, a horror author, narratologist, word nerd, and wishful overthinker. And today we're looking at the second book in the Frightville series. Now, the book we're looking at today is Curse of the Wish Eater. Gotta say, I'm a fan of that name. And as you can probably tell by that title, this is going to be another one of those stories that's sort of a be careful what you wish for type story that's all about wishes, using an evil cursed item, and the things that come of it. So if you've been following this series along, you may be wondering, well, is Curse of the Wish Eater better than Franken-Turkey 2, the other story I've talked about that was a be careful what you wish for type story? Or is this book worse? And I've thought about that, and I think honestly, the answer to that question is no. No, it's not better or worse. I mean, there are some things that it does better, but there's some things that it does worse, definitely. And so we'll need to have a look at the things that it does right and wrong, because I think I said in that episode as well, there is a lot of potential when it comes to a story about wishes, even in the form of a horror story. I mean, it's a bit more challenging in a horror story because having ultimate power is hard to, make scary. But this book has an interesting way of adding a creepy element to that, which it doesn't fully exploit to the book's benefit. But you know what? I'm talking around in circles. I think it'd be a lot easier to explain this stuff if I start with the summary. So, without further ado, let's get into Frightville number 2, Curse of the Wish Eater. We start our story being introduced to the main character, Max. He's shopping with his mother in some store for his Aunt Maxine, because apparently it's her birthday today. And unfortunately, there's nothing in the store that Max finds very interesting. He's very bored. So, whilst his mother's looking at candles and soaps and stuff, she suggests, hey, why don't you check out the new store that's in town? It's just a few shops down, Frightville. I'll come and pick you up when I'm done in here. So, we have our excuse for Max to check out the store, simple but effective, but I like that we once again meet our proprietor, Odds and Ends. And at first, Max isn't all that interested because it looks like it's sort of an antique store because it's got so many old things. But he's looking around and he sees the different varieties of things on the shelves. And when he sees Odds and Ends, he says, wow, this looks a lot more interesting than teacups. But Mr. Ends actually corrects him and says, oh, there actually are some teacups around here. I've got some that, if you drink from them, they can tell your future. But by all means, search deeper into the store and find something that interests you. In fact, if there's one thing that these books, both of them, have done perfectly, is the atmosphere of Frightville, because that kid, he goes walking through, he sees dolls made of scraps of fabric, he sees jars full of keys that look like they could open a treasure chest, even boxes with strange symbols he can't understand, until he finds the titular item of this story. He finds a set of teeth with a wind-up key. But these aren't your regular novelty chatterbox teeth, no, they are a little different. Tucked into the dusty corner of a cupboard was a set of teeth. Max tapped his fingernail against them. He'd thought they might be wood or plastic, but they actually felt like real teeth. Or maybe they were ivory or bone. Whatever they were made of were old and stained, and there was a small metal key sticking out of one side. Max picked the teeth up and discovered that there was a paper tag tied to the key. Written on the tag was a short poem. The Wish Eater. Make a wish and write it down. Place it in the eater's mouth. Go away, come back and check. If it's gone, the answer's yes. Max turned the key that was attached to the teeth. The mouth swung open and a red wooden tongue emerged. He peered inside. How can a toy eat a piece of paper? It was a silly idea, but the Wish Eater was really cool. He'd never seen anything like it. Did you find something? Max turned and saw his mother. He held up the Wish Eater. This, he said. His mother made a face. It's kinda ugly, she said. But you've been really patient, so if you want it, it can be your reward for helping me run all these errands. The two of them went to the counter where Max set the Wish Eater down.
An excellent choice,
the man said as he wrapped the Wish Eater in tissue paper and placed it inside a bag. He handed the bag to Max.
May all your wishes come true.
Okay, so I actually find it funny that there's a little poem attached to it on a tag. I can't remember if this is true of the other books, but I like to imagine that this is a small bit of continuity because the first girl in the first book, she had so many issues because she couldn't remember the poem, so maybe Mr. Ends has decided to attach the poems to the objects that he's selling to make sure that that will not happen again. After all, he is running a business here, he doesn't want to have an unhappy customer. Also, quick side tangent, I did a little bit of research because I was curious where these teeth come from. I don't know if you've ever seen these chattering teeth, but they were a bit of a novelty toy back in the day. And so I was like, well, what is this? Is this meant to be something that's advertising a character or something? I don't know. But I looked it up, and apparently the man who invented them was a guy called Eddie Goldfarb, and apparently he was just inspired because back in the day, people used to sell these little jars and things you could put your dentures into, which some people called a chopper hopper or some sort of silly name, but one term for them was a teeth garage. And that term alone was enough for Eddie to think it would be amusing to see teeth that could move around and drive like cars with their own little garage. And that's what inspired him to create some teeth that could move on their own. But I'm not going to lie, this is a fun little idea that I've seen in a couple of other stories. After all, the idea of taking a stupid novelty that doesn't have really much of a purpose and turning it into something scary, I mean, that's the whole premise behind The Monkey, which was originally a short Stephen King story, which was turned into a movie, taking a novelty toy like the cymbal-banging monkey, the little jolly chimp, and turning it into a horrifying, cursed object. It's a fun idea, and so worth exploring. So let's see where this book goes with it. So after our kid goes back home, we're immediately brought into his family situation, which is that he is the middle child of a raucous and chaotic family. He has two older sisters, and it's described that they made a mess in the kitchen because they were making peanut butter and marshmallow sandwiches. There's a mess everywhere. He's got two younger brothers. There's Charlie, who just seems to be a bit of a rambunctious kid, and so he makes messes just by eating and moving around. But his young brother Arthur is very much like a toddler, and so he spread paint all over the ground as he was doing some finger painting. And so whilst he wants to just relax, go to his room, and maybe make his first wish on the Wish Eater, his mother insists that he needs to help with his younger brother, help clean him up because they've got the party tonight. And so he takes his brother away and helps clean up. And after organizing all of this stuff, they finally have Aunt Maxine come over. And so we basically have a skip forward through this, saying that it was just as chaotic. I mean, not only did our kid have to change his pants again because his brother spilled something on him, I think it was orange juice, but then when he finally got a piece of cake, as he looked away for a second, Aunt Maxine's dog ate it, and because there's so many family members, after he lost his piece, there were no more left for him, so he's not in a good mood at that point, especially about his family. When he finally gets up to his room on his own, he thinks the only thing that he could wish for is that he wishes he was an only child. So he writes out on a little piece of paper, folds it up, winds up the toy, and puts it on its tongue. And the next day when he wakes up, he immediately knows that something is wrong, because he shares his room with Charlie, but when he wakes up, Charlie isn't there. He's wondering if maybe he got up early, or maybe he's getting breakfast, but he goes downstairs, and it's so quiet. His dad is just cooking some pancakes, his mum is reading the newspaper, and his dad asks him if he wants some choc chip pancakes for breakfast. Our kid is confused, and he asks where his brothers and sisters are. Where's Elsie and Elfie? Where's Charlie and Arthur? But they don't know who he's talking about. They assume he's talking about some kids at school, but he assumes it's either the Wish Eater working, or more realistically, he seems to think this is some kind of a prank. Maybe because the Wish Eater doesn't have the bit of paper in it anymore, he assumes maybe one of his brothers and sisters found it, and they decided to pull a prank on him about it. Which I suppose is a reasonable assumption because, magic doesn't exist, and so that's what you'd assume if something like this suddenly happened to you. But what's annoying to me is that this keeps happening. So his dad invites him to go to see a movie he's wanted to see, which he couldn't see because they're busy, so they organize to go see that, and he goes and sees that, and afterwards he's like, oh man, Charlie would really like this, and his dad's like, oh, I don't know, we'll have to meet this friend of yours, you'd have to ask their parents if he can go. And our kid is still confused, especially when he goes back home and he sees that all the pictures have changed. Now all the family pictures are just him and his parents, there's none with the whole family. And when he goes to check his twin sister's room, Elfie and Elsie, he sees that it's some kind of a home office instead. And I get that magic isn't real, and so it would take you a long time to understand it, but it's actually kind of annoying after, I think, at least 8 pages in a row, where our kid's still thinking, okay, prank's over, we can stop this, right? Like, I still don't believe this, and he's still doubting and not believing any of this stuff that's happened. But finally he accepts, okay, this is what that Wish Eater toy did. It actually worked. So I need to use that to fix things. And he comes up with a pretty reasonable way of solving it. He writes down, I wish I had never bought the Wish Eater. And so he puts that in the Wish Eater's mouth. So our kid wakes up the next day, and the Wish Eater is missing. But so are his siblings. And when he heads downstairs, he sees just his 2 parents, and the photos are the same as they were the other day. So he doesn't know if the wish worked, or more likely, he thinks maybe his parents took it. So he asks them if any of them took a toy from his room the other day, some kind of a pair of chattering teeth. But both his parents know for a fact they didn't touch that, because you'd know if you'd seen a pair of teeth like that, right? They're a very unique item. And in fact, his mom doesn't even remember him buying it. So that's how he realizes, okay, so it definitely has reversed that wish, but it doesn't seem to have reversed the other wish, and I don't know why. So he's desperately talking to his parents about maybe he's got to get the teeth. He saw them in the store the other day, and he comes up with some idea that he saw them, he thought about getting them, didn't at the time, so he really wants to get them now. And so his dad says, okay, well, it's still early. If you get ready, I'll take you before school, and then we'll drive over if you're just going to buy the one item. So our kid rushes to get ready. He eats his bacon and eggs, he throws on all his stuff and grabs his bag, and they head to Frightville. When they reached the store, he was out of the car and inside in a flash. He went to the cupboard where he'd found the Wish Eater. It wasn't there. He ran back to the front desk where the same peculiar man from the day before was standing, polishing a snow globe that contained a miniature village. "Hi," Max said. "Do you remember me?" The man paused and looked at Max. He squinted.
You do bear a resemblance to the Viscount of Lower Dog's Breath,
he said.
But he died in 1762, so I suspect you're not him. Are you a descendant?
Not that I know of, Max said. I was in here the other day. I was looking at a toy, a set of teeth with a key that opens them. It was called the Wish Eater. The man nodded.
Of course,
he said.
A most unusual object. Only one like it I've ever come across.
Right, Max said. So it's not here now?
Alas, no,
the man said.
Someone bought it.
Yes, Max wanted to say. Me. Do you remember who bought it? He asked instead.
I do,
the man replied.
A young lady, about your age, I would think. I believe her mother called her Tamira.
Tamira Hinkle? Max asked, naming a girl in his school. He and Tamira had been in the same English class the previous year and had worked on a project together.
I didn't get her last name. She had lovely curly black hair, eyes the color of chestnuts, if that helps.
Actually, it does, Max said, as the description matched Tamira Hinkle exactly. Thanks.
If you're looking for something unique, I have many more things here, the
man said. He held up the snow globe and shook it.
This, for instance, commemorates the blizzard of 1857, which surrounded the village of Haven by the Lake. It lasted all night, and when it was over, the entire town had vanished, and the only thing remaining was a rock with this globe standing on it.
I'm good, Max said, eyeing the snow globe warily. But thank you. He found his parents who were examining the items on the store shelves. Okay, he said. We can go. Did you find what you were looking for? His father asked. Someone else bought it, Max said. Honestly, I really do like the odds and ends character, and I think Mike Ford does as well, because he has a lot of fun adding these characterizations of this slightly antique vintagey, old school type guy, who's also a resolute salesman. I really do enjoy it. But more so, I like the way that we are bringing these characters together, because our kid is going to have to work with this girl, and I do like that we're sort of bringing them together because of the confluence of events from the story. It's a bit of fun. Especially when we first meet her. So our kid, he didn't find the thing he wanted from the store, so he gets in the car and he goes to school. And when he sees Tamira at school, it's pretty obvious what she's done, because she's, just a regular kid you see in the hallways of the school, not the most popular, not the least popular, but on this day, she's sitting with all the popular girls at the table, and they're all enamored with her. In fact, the girls are asking her things like, where she got her clothes from, or how she does her hair, how she gets her skin to glow like it does, when it's really ordinary and she just says she got stuff from the supermarket and that kind of thing. But clearly she's wished to be a popular girl. And because they're all crowding around her, Max tries to approach her, but on the first day he can't even get in at all because, she's completely surrounded by this posse of girls and the other kids who want to be, good friends with her. But then the next day, we skip ahead, and clearly it's starting to grate on her, because she's constantly got these girls chasing after her. As soon as she leaves class, they surround her. Even in the class, even all the other kids seem to be surrounding her. And in fact, there's an announcement that day that she has been elected the school's president, vice president, treasurer, secretary, even though she didn't even apply. So all the kids have voted for her. But quick little side note here, and I'm going to bring this up. It's a bit of a plot hole with this story. I think I mentioned I don't really like the way the magic's done, and part of it is because they miss a trick right here. The way that the magic works, and it's pretty clearly defined by all the other rules, that when you make the wish, you remember the change. You know how the world was before you made the wish. But in this instance, our girl wishes to be popular. Now, when I first read the book, I assumed that she just wished that the popular girls liked her. But as much as I think it's kind of a funny moment to have her be the president, vice president, secretary, treasurer, the only way that that's possible is if all of the students in the school chose not to elect any of the nominees and instead to nominate her for every single position. But if that's the case, then our main kid, Max, should have had his memory rewritten as well. But you know what, we'll talk about this more at the end of the summary. What matters is that Max approaches her and says, look, you bought a wish eater, didn't you? And she, at first, is a little bit dismissive, saying, look, I don't know what you're talking about. And he says, no, you made a wish, didn't you? Because I used it and I made a wish as well. Max explains that he accidentally wished all of his siblings away, not realizing that it would actually happen, and now he wants to wish them back. But I really like that Tamira, now that she's really popular, even though she's finding it a bit frustrating, she realizes that he's trying to take it off of her because he wants to make his wish. So she dismisses him. She says, no, absolutely not. You made up some sob story because you wanted to take it from me just because you didn't get to buy it first. So no, go away, leave me alone. So she walks away. And I do like this part because, like I said, when it comes to these wishes, you've got ultimate power. So this is actually playing around with that, the idea that they are wanting to fight for this. It doesn't go too far into it, but it adds a little bit more interest into the plot and drama here. Especially because he will talk to her the next day and she'll agree to help him, but that night we get a scene as he's basically walking around the house, and I do like that it's kind of a creepy scene where he realizes that all of the things that remind him of his family are gone as well. Not just his family themselves. In fact, he can't even remember if his little brother, that scar he got when he was a kid, was that on his chin or was that on his forehead? And there's one bit, like I said, I'm not fond of the magic stuff. There is a bit how he opens up an old kid's book that originally was passed down from kid to kid, and this one has all of their names written in it. And so he uses that to remember their names because he's almost forgotten little, what is it? Was it Archie or Arthur? He can't remember his name, but he sees the name written there, and so he writes all their names on a piece of paper and puts it in his pocket. But there's this weird thing how he sees all the names written there, and they slowly fade as he's looking at them, sort of implying that the magic forgot a bit and was sort of catching up, which I'm not really a fan of. I'm also not really a fan of the idea that the magic is making his memories of his brothers and sisters fade. Obviously, it would take a lot longer than a single day or 2 or 3 days to forget your whole family, but I think it would have been more fun if they just implied that it was his anxiety about it that was making him worry, so that way it would be more relatable and less like this is just a really cruel magic curse. Anyway, like I said, he goes to school the next day and he sees that Tamira is getting really frustrated. In fact, she actually runs away from the kids, but of course they all start chasing her because they want to talk to her. They want to talk to the most popular girl in school, so she manages to hide away in a janitor's closet and she pulls Max inside and says, okay, you're right, so we need to work together because we've got some wishing to do. So they get together and they're sort of discussing who's going to go first, and I like it. Our kid obviously wants his family back. He's been desperate trying to get them back. He's really upset that he's lost them. But if he's truly honest, he wants her to go first just to make sure that it works because he's worried that it might do something nasty to him again. So she writes, I wish I wasn't the most popular girl in school anymore, folds it up and puts it in the mouth. And this is the part about the magic I actually like, that neither of them know how long it takes. Both of them left it overnight when it worked the first time, and the poem just says, place it there, leave it and come back. So they don't know how long it's going to take, but Tamira says, okay, well, it's in its mouth, so I'll give you the wish eater now, and I'll let you know when it works, and then you can make the next wish. So he takes it, and they go back to class, but then at the end of class, he's trying to find Tamira, because he wants to see if the wish worked, and she is actually hiding behind some bins. She pulls him behind to join her again, and she says, look, I just had to get away from the angry mob. And this is when we realize that her wish backfired again. Now, instead of making her the most popular, it took her I don't want to be popular to the exact extreme, making her the least popular girl in school. Now everyone thinks that she cheated to get her name into the votes, and in fact they think she cheated on the math tests, and so all the kids are furious at her. They want to hunt her down and punish her for tricking them like that. So Tamira asks if she can put another wish in, just to fix this. And they never actually get into it, but I kind of like this because in a way she's in direct physical danger, whereas his family's already disappeared. They're not going to disappear more. I mean, I guess you could argue that him forgetting them. But anyway, I still think this makes sense. So she writes another little note to hopefully fix this, to make it so that she's just middle popular the way she was before. And she folds it up and she gives it to him to put into the Wish Eater's mouth. So he goes home, he sets the Wish Eater on his nightstand, and he puts her wish inside. And he is staring at it, wondering how long it's going to take. Like, is he going to have to sleep all day and then wake up the next day again? He really wants to have his family back. And so he thinks, well, there's nothing saying that you can only do one wish at a time, right? So he writes his wish on a bit of paper that he wants his family back, and he puts it next to her wish, and then he goes to bed. So he wakes up the next day and he has a look at the Wish Eater, and sure enough, the paper is missing. Both pieces are gone. And so excitedly he jumps out of bed and he goes down to check on his family, but it's just his mum and dad. And he asks them if there's anyone else there that morning, but they say no, it's just them, like usual. And so he heads back upstairs to check the Wish Eater to see maybe the paper fell out or something, but it's not possible. It doesn't actually have a back. There's just a bit of plastic at the back, so it's not like it would fall out. It has to be consumed by whatever the magic is. So he knows that it's granted his wish somehow. And we get our answer when his phone vibrates, because he gets a message from Tamira. As he was eating his Odie bits, his phone vibrated. He looked at the screen and saw a text from Tamira. "We have a problem." He texted her back 3 question marks. She replied instantly, "Meet me on the corner in 5. Max set his phone down and spooned cereal into his mouth as quickly as he could. "What's the hurry?" his father asked. "I've got to get to school a little early," Max said, which was kind of true and therefore not a lie. "Big test?" asked his mother. "Something like that," said Max, picking up his bowl and tipping the last of the milk into his mouth. He took the bowl to the sink. "Bye," he said to his parents. "Have a good day," they called out as he went to the front door, picked up his backpack and left the house. Tamira lived 3 streets over. As Max walked down the sidewalk toward her street, he could see her standing on the corner, but there were 3 other kids standing with her, whom he didn't recognize. As he got closer, he saw that one of them was a boy and the other 2 were girls. "Hey," he said, waving. Tamira didn't look happy. "Are these your cousins or something?" "No," said Tamira. She took a deep breath. "They're my brothers and sisters." "You don't have," Max began, then stopped. He looked at the kids again. The 2 girls looked an awful lot alike. His mouth fell open as a horrible thought came to him. "I do now," Tamira said. "Max, meet Elfie, Elsie, and Charlie." "Hi," the 3 kids said together. They smiled happily. Max stared at them, speechless. "Before you ask, Arthur is at home with my Aunt Jackie," Tamira said. "And my parents think this is all totally normal, like there have always been 5 kids." Max continued to stare at the kids. "Wow," he said finally. "That's really bizarre." "You think?" said Tamira. "So did you make a wish last night that your brothers and sisters would be back?" "Yeah," Max admitted. "I added it to yours." Tamira groaned. Behind her, Elsie and Elfie laughed. Max found himself stealing glances at them. The resemblance to Tamira was obvious. The fact that they had his sisters' names was freaky. "The Wish Eater granted your wish but gave it to me," Tamira said. "Your wish was gone too," said Max. "But nothing was different at my house." Tamira got a funny look on her face. "What?" Max said. "Nothing," Tamira said. "I mean, it's probably nothing. It's just that my wish wasn't anything to do with my family." "What was it?" Max asked warily. "We're going to be late for school," Charlie announced, "and I have a test." "Let's walk," Tamira suggested, heading off in the direction of the school. Max wants to know what exactly she wished for, and Tamira says that she wished for things to go back to normal, like they were before. But the truth is revealed when they get to school, as some of the girls approach him from the cheer team and say they're excited to be working with him. And Max doesn't know what they're talking about, and they say that it's going to be so great. It's the first time that a boy has ever gotten onto the cheerleading squad. So Max turns to Tamira, and she admits, okay, she added a little bit to her wish. She wanted things to be normal, and she wanted to be on the cheerleading squad. I mean, she really likes cheering. And so there's going to be a scene later. Max has to go to the cheerleading practice, and he's not very good at all. He's very uncoordinated. And so after they finish that, he ends up going to Tamira's place because they need to fix this. But I like it. There's a scene where, because they're in her bedroom, and her house is very crowded, the little brother Arthur, her little brother Arthur is there, and he wants to play with the Wish Eater because he says it looks like Chatterbox. or Chatterbox, as he said in his little toddler voice. And Tamira doesn't know what he's talking about, but Max explains that Chatterbox is a dragon character with big goofy teeth that is on a television show called Enchanted Castle. Now, quick little side note, because when I saw this thing talking about an Enchanted Castle kids show with puppets and a big dragon, I was wondering, is that a reference to Eureka's castle? For those of you who don't know, so with Chapter Spooks books, obviously the one that everyone knows is R.L. Stine, but what some people don't know is that before R.L. Stine wrote the Goosebumps books, he was working in joke books and other things for kids, and he was actually the co-creator of a television show in association with some of the same workers from the Sesame Street workshop, and they created a show called Eureka's Castle, which had a dragon and a sorceress character and a bat and some, a fun little show for kids. But I was wondering, is this a reference to that because this is also a Chapter Spooks book? I don't know, it could be a coincidence, but I thought that was an interesting connection right there. But anyway, so Arthur wants to play with the toy, and Tamira just says, no, go away, you can't use it, it's not a toy for you. And Arthur starts crying, and Tamira explains that, well, she doesn't know what to do because she hasn't had siblings before. She's used to being an only child, and so Max steps in to do a little cheerleader dance routine to make little Arthur stop crying. And so he does that, and then Arthur feels better, and then he runs off to go drawing some pictures. Now, thankfully, they both decide, even though her house is a bit hectic, he has spent a long time without his family, and I think he is really worried about forgetting them entirely. So she lets him wish first. So he writes his wish, and he puts it in the mouth. And then, the same deal they had last time, because she needs to make the next wish, they decide to leave the Wish Eater with her, and then as soon as his wish is done, then she can make her wish, and hopefully this will all be sorted out. So Max goes home, and hopefully for the last time in his bedroom that's empty except for him, he goes to sleep. And then this book takes something of a turn. The first thing Max noticed when he woke up was that it was pitch dark. He thought it must still be nighttime, but he wasn't tired, and something about the darkness seemed artificial, as if the windows in his room had been covered up. Then he reached out his hand to turn on the bedside light and touched something soft. He felt around some more and realized that his bed was surrounded by velvet curtains. He pushed the curtain closest to him aside and discovered that it was indeed morning, and although he was in a bedroom, it wasn't his bedroom. For one thing, this bedroom was round. Also, it was made of stone. The floor, the walls, the ceiling, all of it was made out of stone blocks. The windows were just holes in the stone walls with no glass covering them, and a warm breeze wafted in. Max sniffed. The air had a strange scent to it, like a burned-out match or a smoky campfire. Fearing that wherever he was might be on fire, he scrambled out of bed and ran to the window. Looking out, he gasped. He was in the tower of a castle. Spread below him was the rest of it, a sprawling pile of stones with more towers, a drawbridge, and a moat surrounding the whole thing. Beyond the castle were rolling green hills covered in flowers. A single, narrow dirt road wound through the hills to the front gate. As he looked out the window, a huge shadow passed overhead, accompanied by another whiff of that peculiar smell. Max looked up and gasped again as a fat dragon with purple and blue scales swooped lazily over the top of the tower. It belched loudly, puffing out a stream of smoke. "Chatterbox!" Max exclaimed. He couldn't believe it. The dragon from the TV show was flying around outside his window, and that could mean only one thing. "We're in the Enchanted Castle," said a voice behind him. Now, that voice behind him turns out to be his brother, his actual brother, not the one that's actually Tamira's brother, and it's Charlie. So a lot of things are happening, and so I'll explain what happens. So he goes downstairs, and Tamira comes up, and he sees that all of his siblings are there, as well as all of her new wished-in siblings, and they're talking, and Max realizes what happened, and he confirms this by talking to her Arthur, because he was drawing a picture when they left him. He was drawing a picture of the Enchanted Castle, because that's what they were talking about. And he thinks that he must have seen them putting the wish in the Wish Eater's mouth and tried to do the same thing with his picture. And so by doing that, it wished them all to the Enchanted Castle. Okay. You know what, we'll talk a little bit more about that at the end. What matters is that they don't have the Wish Eater with them, and so they're not really sure what to do. But Charlie, because I like this, because he's the second youngest, he's seen the show, but he's old enough to actually enunciate and talk about it. And so he explains that there is a wizard in the castle called Wandsworth. So if they got here by magic, maybe that's the best way to get out is by magic. So they managed to go to Wandsworth. And even though he's a grumpy old wizard type and he doesn't seem interested that they're there, in fact, he's annoyed that they're there because he said they're supposed to have the moat up, so they don't want to have visitors. And they say, well, the only way we'll get out of here is if we can go home. They explain their situation, the whole thing with the Wish Eater. And when they explained that the Wish Eater was a set of magical teeth that looks a lot like Chatterbox's teeth, the wizard Wandsworth explains that it sounds a lot like one of Chatterbox's siblings, Jabberjaw. Maybe when he lost his teeth as a baby, they must have used them to make the Wish Eater. Okay. You know, we're going to talk about this at the end as well. What matters is that they decide, okay, well, it's the dragon teeth. You know, dragon magic is very complicated, so they decide to write a very simple wish, because dragons can't read very well. And so they write a simple wish saying, I wish everything was the way it should be. So, okay, then they decide that seems like the best wish. So the wizard gets Chatterbox to lean down close to them, and he writes their wish on the scroll with a pen, and he gives it to the monster, the dragon, to eat. And so it chomps down the piece of parchment and then coughs out and belches a huge belch of purple smoke. And as the smoke clears, Max sees himself standing in his own bedroom with his brother's bed across from him, and Charlie is there. And Charlie wakes up and says they had the strangest dream that they were all in the enchanted castle. So he goes downstairs and he's happy to see all of his family, even though it's chaotic, even though his brother manages to spill milk on his trousers and all this. He's so happy to see his family that he's looking forward to school. And in fact, he even gets a text message from Tamira saying that everything worked out for her as well. And so they decide to meet before school. And so he heads out and he meets her at the front gate and sees that all of her wished siblings are still there. And he says, wait, but I thought we wished them away. And she says, no, we wished that things were the way they should be. And I guess the Wish Eater decided that I should have a family. And when she gets to school, she learns that she's on the cheerleading squad as well. So I guess that's the way things should be. The end. So first things first, I think I want to say this is a very pleasant little story. You know, it's a very comfortable little story about magic and things. And for that reason, I don't like it. I don't like it at all. This is meant to be a horror story, and it's really not scary. I mean, there's only really 2 points about this story that get kind of scary. There's the bit where the kid realizes his family's gone and he's sort of worried about forgetting them forever. Okay, that's kind of a creepy idea. It doesn't explore it too much, but that's a creepy idea. And then the second part is when Tamira has the Wish Eater and our kid has to negotiate to get this item of ultimate power from her. But you know what? Both of those points are actually downgraded, because in the very first thing, he's worried about forgetting his family, but he's forgetting his family because of the magic of the Wish Eater thing, which to me creates a degree of separation from the reader and the main character, because most people wouldn't assume that they would slowly have the names of their family members gone. I thought if it focused more on the point it actually brings up, the scar on his brother's chin, like that's a small detail that's the kind of thing that you'd forget, and you'd start to realize, you'd get into that catastrophic anxious mindset of thinking, oh, if I could forget something as small as that, what if I forget more? What if I forget the color of their eyes? I mean, what if I forget their birthday? You know, like, what if I forget the rest of them as well? Like, you could make that scarier without throwing in, oh, and it's the magic Wish Eater thing doing it in sort of this cruel, almost ironic sense. And then that second part about him getting the Wish Eater from Tamira, you do realize that all you need to do is put the piece of paper in its mouth, right? You don't need to have the Wish Eater in your possession. In fact, the kids both decide when they work together, all right, I'll put the wish in and then you hang on to it so that you can wish next. So why couldn't that have been the deal? Why would he not have said, instead of, oh, give me the Wish Eater, he could have said, look, I just need to make one wish. I need to get my family back. Please, I'll just give you the piece of paper. You put it in there, right? Like, why not? Heck, I'd even argue that would make it more interesting, because then it would explain how she gets that family, because she would wish on his behalf, but the Wish Eater wouldn't know that. As far as it's concerned, she put the paper in, and so that would explain how she would get the family, and then you get rid of that silly scene, which it's not scary at all, it's really just kind of silly that he's on the cheerleading squad. which is only really funny if you are that invested into gender norms that you think that that's a ridiculous concept that a boy would want to be a cheerleader. This book does try to soften it by saying that it's funny because he is a terrible dancer, like he's really uncoordinated, but even so, it's not scary. None of this book is scary because it's really just sort of a fantasy adventure, especially that ending, which comes right out of nowhere. None of the magic established that you could draw a picture, and from the way that Arthur speaks, it's clear that he didn't write, "I want to go to Enchanted Castle," because he has trouble speaking as it is. He has a terrible lisp, he seems to drop letters. But also, that's a kid's show. There's nothing really scary about that. I mean, one thing that could be scary, they don't even mention it, but what if they'd been sent to another fictional world that doesn't have a wizard in it? Isn't it lucky they went to this world that had a wizard who luckily has a dragon that has the exact same magical ability? Ain't that convenient? Although then there's that weird, I don't even want to get into it, but I'll just mention how ridiculous it is that he mentions, oh, there was a second dragon called Jabberjaw, or maybe if you got its baby teeth, you could put it in a little... Is this really implying that the fictional, within the story, it's a fictional television show made for children? Are they implying that it's actually a true thing that happened within the same world somehow, or maybe some kind of dimension where it's attached, that then odds and ends managed to get into this television show to get the teeth that he then put in? You know what I'm saying? This is so ridiculous that in order to make it work, you need to start writing fan fiction in your head that's even stupider than what was happening right here in the story. What is happening? No, but the thing is, even though I hate all of that stuff, there's some stuff about this that I really do like. I like that even though this is a story about wishes, it does take power away from the main character very easily, very quickly, in a way that I believe is reasonable. I mean, he did the first wish, it was terrible, got rid of his family, he started to panic, and so he just wanted it to be undone, so he wished that he hadn't bought the thing in the first place, but then it undoes it. And whilst, like I said, you could argue that the magic system isn't 100%, ironed out, you could say that technically by him wishing his family away, that's something that would have had to have happened when they were born, that they weren't born, whereas wishing that he didn't have the Wish Eater happened a day ago, so maybe it's a timeline thing? You can justify it. Like I said in the previous episode, it's about whether or not it makes emotional sense. And to me, that kind of makes emotional sense. Although what doesn't is that whole plot hole issue I mentioned before, because he didn't remember the stuff that she wished for. Well, she didn't remember the stuff that he wished for, but he remembered the stuff that she wished for, which doesn't make a lot of sense. But anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. I wanted to talk about the stuff that I liked. And one of the things that I really liked is it's only mentioned in that rhyme that you write the wish, you put it in its mouth, and you come back and check, and if it's gone, that means your wish came true. Now, I love that as an idea, the idea that you can throw in, and obviously it's a plot device, because as a writer, you could say, oh, well, if they wish something to happen, why don't they just wish it away? And it's like, oh, well, the answer is that it didn't work that time. It said no. But this book squanders that opportunity because, I don't know if you noticed this, but not only did it never say no to any of the wishes, it actually granted wishes that didn't make sense, like that Enchanted Castle thing. They didn't even add a scene where our kid wished his family back and it didn't work, right? Why not throw that in? That's scary inherently because he goes, oh, I did this terrible thing, I need to undo it. He tries it, and then it doesn't work, and so he has to think some other way around it. Why wouldn't you do that? I recognize that this book doesn't have as many words. I mean, it does have 100 pages, but I've noticed the words are bigger and it seems to be spaced in a way that these stories are a lot shorter. So one could maybe argue that there wasn't that much space on the page, but I would argue in return that they spent an awful lot in the last few chapters with that Enchanted Castle thing, so if you got rid of that and focused more on the actual things that are scary about the wish-eating toy to begin with, then you would have the space to play with this stuff. You would actually explore the ideas that were scarier. But this book seemed like it was actually afraid of being scary. You notice at the very end of the book that it had both of the families living. Now, they mention offhandedly that if they turn things back the way they were, then her family would disappear. But Tamira comes to terms with that. She says, well, they weren't supposed to exist in the first place, it's fine. And so they decide to go ahead with his wish. But then at the end of the book, they say, oh, well, I guess it was meant to be. And in my head, whether or not you think that that's meant to be some commentary on how big a family is meant to be, which, I'm not even going to dive into the politics of that because it's not really something that I want to get into right now. But more importantly, I think the reason it did that is because you are, in a sense, killing those people. They may not have existed a day ago, but from their perspective, they did. They have the memories of all those times. And I don't know how exactly the magic works, if this is a new timeline, a new reality, whatever, but turning them into non-existent persons, whilst physically different, is philosophically the same as killing them. And I think that the book got rid of that because it was worried that it would be too confronting for kids, but it's a scary story, for goodness sake. Like, that could have been, you could have written a whole chapter about the fact that Tamira got rid of them and then was regretting the fact that she got rid of them, even though she didn't want them to be there. She thinks, well, I'm responsible for these people not existing. Like, you could make that into a scary moment, I mean, argue amongst yourselves whether or not you think that that's appropriate for a middle grade book, but still, this book wasn't scary. It's like I'm desperate to find the scares in this book, which there were so many opportunities to be scary, and yet it's like the book never took that opportunity. It always took the path of least resistance towards a fun fantasy adventure, which I think I mentioned it before. That's the cardinal sin of a horror story, that it wasn't scary at all. And so, even though there were some bits I liked, I really liked the character stuff well. I love the descriptions. I love odds and ends. He's a fun little character. This is still a C- for me. And it's so weird because the guy who wrote this, Mike Ford, like I said, I'm under the impression that he wanted to write this series so he could get some of his horror stories out there. But why would he pick one of the ideas he had, which could have so easily just been a fun fantasy-like romp? Honestly, I don't know. All I know is that I didn't enjoy it as a Chapter Spooks book. So what can we learn from this book? Well, to me, the first lesson occurred to me as I was reading through that first bit that I wasn't really enjoying, and it's the importance of understanding attention. I'm not really sure what the correct term for this is, because if it were a film, you'd be talking about the cinematography and the point of view, where exactly the camera is facing. But especially in this kind of a story where it's told from a limited, omniscient third-person perspective, it's not really the point of view so much as it's the attention of the story, the things that it's choosing to spend time writing about. And I noticed it in this story when I thought it was doing it poorly, which was in that instance where the kid is constantly thinking, okay, this is still a prank, right? Like, my family's going to pop out at any second, they're going to reveal that this is not true. And the thing is, I was looking at that scene and I thought, this is really boring. But on self-reflection, I realized that I don't think it's unrealistic. Because in the real world, magic doesn't exist. Obviously, magic doesn't exist by definition. But it makes sense that if something like that occurred to you, you'd be desperately clinging on to every opportunity to explain it in some other way. Now, unfortunately, there's not many other ways to explain how 4 people disappear from your life entirely, other than they did it on purpose as some kind of a prank. So I understand why he doesn't come up with different explanations, but this book spends at least a chapter and a half of him going, all right, is it, they're going to pop out at some point and reveal. I just wanted him to finally accept that the Wish Eater did it. But the fact that it took so long to get there is not because it's unrealistic, like I said. The issue is that this book paid attention to that aspect. Realism is something that's important in a lot of these books, at least in my opinion, because that's where a lot of the scares come from, especially when they are focusing on kids in the real world. Now, there is definitely a debate to be had about whether realism is necessary for a Chapter Spooks book. I don't think so, but a lot of them, especially this type where it's the relatable kid in the real world, I think realism matters. But the trick to making a book stay interesting, even though a kid is doing something that realistically they would do that's not interesting, is to make sure you are focusing your attention on the bits that are necessary for the plot and that move it forward and that maintain intrigue and interest. Personally, I tend to think about this the other way around, because to me, the story is what's happening and I have to decide whether or not I use a time skip, so I'm more interested in the bits that I choose not to pay attention to. And that can be a little bit difficult, especially because I find a sudden long time skip very... it can take you out of the moment if it's not done right. In fact, sometimes when reading these books, I don't dwell on it too long because it does enough to bring you into that scene, but if suddenly a week passes and the book's like, oh, a week later I was doing my homework, like, it can be a little jarring, and so I've always tried to soften that kind of a time skip as much as I can during my own writing, with adding a little bit of, oh, and in the week that passed, I did this, this, and this. Like, add a little bit of details just so it doesn't feel like, I guess to me, it's the difference between it feeling like a chapter skip and feeling like a fast forward. You know, it's showing you that something did happen in the in-between, it's just that you weren't paying as much attention to it as opposed to just jumping straight there. But either way, this is all just another example of murder your darlings. Just because it's a part of the story that you think is relevant for the character, it needs to be relevant to the reader. So that's the first thing, is that I think you should be critical of the kinds of things that your story focuses on, the attention of the story from that narrator's point of view. But the second thing that I think this story can help us learn is what I was talking about at the very beginning. That I love the premise of this story, that the wishes, it's not some genie, it's this novelty toy, which is kind of like the kind of thing you've seen before. And this is an example of something that I personally like indulging in my own fiction, and that's the idea of exploiting the gaps. And what do I mean by that? Well, I've talked before about how I think that fiction should be honest. If you know something to be true, then you should try to write it in such a way that it's obvious that that's the fictional element of your story. But the thing is, there are some things when we don't know if they're true or not. Now, some of those could be some of the big questions like, why do we dream? What lies beyond the stars? What is time? Or it could be some of the smaller questions like the ones explored in this book, things like, why would you make a novelty toy that looks like a set of teeth? And personally, I love this kind of thing because the narrative honesty is right there. Nobody knows the answer to this question, so everybody knows that you haven't found the answer and decided to reveal it in a fictional book that you wrote. Like, that doesn't make any sense. No, instead, people know that it's not true, but because the answer isn't there, it leaves the opportunity open for people to suspend their disbelief, to think, okay, well, it could be that. Also, a little pro tip out there, if you like writing stuff to do with military and police, if there's anything that is top secret, you can also exploit that, because if they're not going to reveal the truth, then you can make up your own truth, then you can do the whole, secret organization thing. Like, that's a bit of fun. Or you can do the same thing with well-known urban legends and cryptids. Like, I think it's a lot of fun playing with them. Unfortunately, there are some people who think that they're real. I mean, they're not, but okay, go off. But the point is, you can have so much fun playing in the gaps in knowledge. And it might even encourage someone to look for the actual answer at some point in the future. But at least for now, for your story, you can play around in this area to get people imagining something new. And whilst I don't enjoy this story so much, I cannot fault it for utilizing that idea of just, hey, what is this weird little toy? What if it could do something more? What if there's more to it than what we all originally thought? And hey, if a book like this can do it, a book that I did enjoy, I don't see any reason why you writers out there couldn't use it to write a book that I would. So, that was The Curse of the Wish Eater. A fun, comfortable little book that wasn't scary enough for me to enjoy, but it does bring us halfway through the Frightville series. In the next episode, we'll be looking at the third book in the series, and I have no shame in telling you that there's a little spoiler, that this is my favorite book in this series, even though it's a ghost story, and I've said before that I don't like them. And so if that seems confusing, hey, if you thought this was scary, just wait to see what I've got in store for you next time.